Week 15's upon us after a great game to close out last night with the Baltimore Ravens and the Cleveland Browns. What a thriller that was, with the Ravens winning 45-42. But here's a few players I don't want on my team heading into Week 15 at quarterback. The first guy's Matt Ryan, the Atlanta Falcons. Matt Ryan's a guy I just can't count on heading into this week. And this week, he's got a decent matchup versus Tampa Bay. But I'm not just going to trust Ryan because it's a decent matchup. He hasn't passed 17 fantasy points since week 12 is Ryan. And this week versus Tampa Bay gives up the 14th least amount of fantasy points to quarterbacks. And Ryan, week 12, he had 17.90, 185 yards, 2 passing touchdowns. And then the week 13 versus New Orleans, 273, a touchdown and a fumble loss. And then last week in a great matchup versus the Chargers, 224, touchdown, 3 interceptions. So Ryan, he's not getting the job done the last 3 weeks. I can't trust him. And if you made it this far with him as your quarterback, kudos to you. But he's a guy that's droppable in my opinion. And we don't know if Julio Jones is coming back. So I would just cut Ryan here. The second quarterback I'm going to cut this week's Cam Newton of the New England Patriots. He's been on this list many times this season. But people are still owning Newton, and Newton's still owned in 61% of fantasy leagues. And last week, he didn't get the job done versus the Rams. He had 119 passing yards, an into, and only 16 yards rushing. So if Newton's not getting the rushing yards or the rushing touchdowns, he's not doing anything. And now in the last 2 out of 3 of his fantasy games, he's failed to reach at least 5 fantasy points, so that's not going to get the job done. This week he's got a tough matchup in Miami versus the Dolphins, who give up the 5th least amount of fantasy points to quarterbacks, and we just saw Patrick Mahomes have some struggles with 3 interceptions over there in Miami. So Newton, it's an easy guy to drop and cut this week. And the third and final quarterback I'm going to get off my roster and drop this week's Drew Brees, the New Orleans Saints. Brees, now reports are coming out, he's probably not going to play this week versus the Chiefs, and I believe it. They're doing well with Taysom Hill. They're 3-1, even though losing a tough game versus Philadelphia Eagles. But this week, Brees, he's uncertain. I think they're going to roll with Hill one more week or even next week as well, and then have Brees ready for a tune-up games in week 16 or 17. So Drew Brees, I know you could have injured spots in your league, but if you need a roster spot, Brees, I don't think he's going to do much for fantasy, especially with this week and next week left. So I would drop him. He's still owned in 66% of leagues. But like I said, I would just drop Brees and not worry about him coming back and making an impact this season. So that's a few quarterbacks I'm going to drop here heading into week 15.